No. Hello, welcome in everybody. We'll give a minute or so for folks to come in and get set, and we will get started on our webinar for this afternoon or evening, wherever you're joining us from. We're happy that you're here. Hi, Jorge, nice to see you here. Welcome in. I recognize Robert as well. Nice to see some friends and familiar faces. Great to have us here. Brenda, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, let me kick us off. So welcome everyone. We are excited to have you here live, especially as we think about the year winding down. So there's state testing, graduations, all that stuff going on. So we're excited you're here. If you've decided to leverage the webinar as an asynchronous resource, we are glad you're here too. You're at the Leadership through the Lens of UDL webinar from the CECL Project, California Coalition for Inclusive Learning. We'll be sharing tools that you can use to learn how your system addresses barriers to learning and develop some change ideas. And also, if you haven't got a chance, we started this talk around leadership in UDL last month. So we talked a bit about SIC, some of our tools for leadership, and so they connect to this webinar as well. If you can navigate toward the QR code or the bit.ly link just to get set up. Make sure you're able to access that.
Perfect. And we'll also be dropping all of those links for folks in the chat as well. So
yes,
hang with us as we get all of those ready for you to access. A couple more people trickling in. We're happy that you're here. So thank you, Elisa, for dropping that in. All right, folks, you want to hit the next slide, Melissa? Great. My name is Shamron Coyle. For those of you that don't know me, I am the director of the California Coalition for Inclusive Learning. Important to note our partners in this work. This is a grant-funded project that we've been going for the last 4 years together in partnership with the California Department of Education, the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence. The lead in the project is Placer County Office of Education, and our expertise and partnership with CAST as well. And then when we go to the next slide, you'll be able to see a snapshot of our partners across the state of California. We've been very fortunate to combine our knowledge and expertise with friends across the state. So we have Fresno County Office of Education, Los Angeles. Actually, one of our co-facilitators today, Fred Cochran, comes to us from the San Joaquin County Office of Education. We partner with Santa Clara, Sonoma, and 2 geographic lead agencies, the Valley to Coast Collaborative and the Capital Central Foothills Area Consortium. I also want to give a shout out to a couple of new partners that we have been working with over the course of the year. You'll be able to find support and resources at the San Diego County Office of Education, as well as the Imperial County Office of Education, and a shout out to our friends and partners at the Inyo County Office of Education as well. So we've worked really hard over the course of this grant to reach all the 4 corners of the state in this project, and we're really happy to have those partnerships and the expertise of our friends in those places and spaces. We're also winding down. This will be the final live webinar of the season for our project this year. And so Brenda talked about it at the beginning. What you'll see on your screen is a list of the topics that we've included this year, and including today's topic, leading through the lens of UDL. And with that, I just want to thank you all for being here, and I will pass it on to my colleagues and friends.
Awesome. Ruth, you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. Hi, I'm Ruth Templeton. I am a UDL implementation specialist with CAST. Probably not, right? I'll pass it on to you, Melissa.
Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa Sanjay. I'm a senior professional learning and implementation specialist at CAST. I'm currently physically located in Boston. I am lucky enough to often be physically located in California because I've been working with the Cecil project. So they've adopted me. They tell me that I can be an honorary Californian. So I'm happy about that. I have done a lot of work with the school-wide implementation criteria and working with Ruth and Brenda and Elisa and Shamron and Fred around building some things around that SIC to really support schools in their UDL implementation journey and in addressing barriers to access an agency for students in all spaces and places in the school community. Prior to CAST, I was first a social worker, then a teacher, and then a principal for about 17 years in Boston's alternative high schools. And those are for our students that either dropped out or were pushed out of their high school and were returning back to get their diplomas.
Wow, that was so much better than my intro. Thank you, Melissa.
Ruth is also a former school admin, special education focused, and worked a lot with us on the on some systems projects here in Massachusetts. So I'll do it for you, Ruth.
Yeah,
Fred,
Want to do
introduce
mine?
yourself.
yeah, you could go, Fred. Sorry.
No, we're part of one big happy family here, everyone. So
Yeah,
I'm
I want to
Fred.
do yours, Fred. I want to pass it over to the Mr. Rogers of UDL.
Be
Fred
be my
Hoffman.
guest. Yeah, having a little fun here. Yes, my call to fame is the Mr. Rogers of UDL, which I love. Shamron invented all of this, and I absolutely love it. I am the UDL implementation specialist at San Joaquin County Office of Education, and I am so fortunate to be part of Cecil 1.0 and 2.0 and grown into this experience. Happy to share a little bit about what I know today in the theme of today's webinar. So I'm 26 years in education, mixed classroom administration. I've been at San Joaquin County now for 10 years, and really have found my home here and being able to work with all of you. So thank you very much for having me today. So with that in mind, I'm still very optimistic, aren't I? So our opening today is thinking about what does it take to be an architect for change in education? Thinking about that, what tools and mindsets or supports do you believe are essential for designing systems that truly include every learner? And we hope we're looking through the lens of UDL, of course. So what does it take to be an architect for change in education? And as you think about this, feel free to drop that in the chat. Or if you want to raise a hand or you want to jump on and say hello, please do so.
I love the
Must
phrasing
have
of your
strengths.
question, Fred. Architect for change in education. That's a really great way to think of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm a builder. I mean, I think about building. I've been doing work with community schools, and I keep thinking of a structure and things that go together. And there's so many facets to consider, right? I love must-have strengths-based mindset, and mindset is, thank you, Kristen. That's a great contribution. It's resilience. Thank you. Have a vision. Where do you want to go? What do you want to achieve? Knowledge of your own goals and agency. You have to share your why and have a vision. Good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add on to that, the vision and the why, and then resources, knowing where they are and how to tap into them, and allocation and which levers to pull and push at what time, I think are also really important components. I love all those responses.
And kind of know where to go when you don't know. You know, that's the thing.
Yeah.
We're here to do that. We have the tools and resources to help you get to the next steps. So, or the next thing you might need. So, Great. You have to share your why. I love it. Thank you for joining in today.
Yeah.
Growth
Growth
mindset, discussing the undiscussables. Yes.
Hmm.
We call
Courageous
those
conversations.
exactly, Melissa, those brave spaces, right?
I think you have to be reflective enough to know when you don't know, right? So
Mm.
often ego can get in the way of
True.
of making change, right? But being able to reflect and be able to know when you don't know.
Yeah. And being comfortable with the unknown. Thank you. I hope I'm saying it right, Celeste. Thank you. Yeah, for sure.
Hey.
All
Thank
right.
you for all those responses. Also, just a little reminder, you can use that chat box at any time to introduce yourself, ask us a question. You can interrupt us there. You can interrupt us by opening your mic if you want to ask a question as we go on, share an idea or connection you see, or even hyperlink a resource for your colleagues. Zoom has frequent updates, so I'm not sure if this is still true in the meeting. I think instead of all panelists and attendees, you choose everyone to chat everyone, or you could chat someone directly if you want to speak to someone directly. And if you want to speak to someone directly publicly, you can add their name in the everyone box and just respond to something they've said. In terms of your learning environment, we have that bit.ly that takes you to our home base, which has all of the webinars and the tools and the resources shared in the webinar. And I think there's also an optional note-taking guide there. And so what we'll do is if we mention anything that comes through or we've forgotten to link, we'll make sure to link it after this webinar. So it's going to be there for you. So that home base is kind of your one-stop shop for all of the CECL webinars this year. So today our agenda is to talk a little bit about that why, the UDL for what, think about the problem of practice and go through a problem of practice that that Fred has brought with him to share with us and with the school he's been working with. We're going to talk about how do we gather data, analyze it, and come up with change ideas aligned to the SIC. So today's goals are for us our learning goals are to use the UDL SIC to address a system-wide problem of practice, to think about how do we investigate our systems, and to align our change ideas to the SIC. So given that those are our goals, think for a minute, because we know our brains are goal directed. What is your goal for today? And you can drop that in the chat, and then we can try to tailor some of our responses to meet some of those goals. So if you are willing to publicly let us know your goal, we'll try to help you reach that in our little pop-up learning community we're in right now. So we had an SIC, school-wide implementation criteria. Thank you, Brenda, for defining my terms. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everyone knew what it was. So.
To make connections between today's learning and some of the common leadership practices we leverage here in California. Yes, that'd be great to help them. And if some of our California friends can help make those connections, that would be awesome. To listen and learn from the amazing team on how CCEE can support. Thank you, Kristen. Any other goals? Sharpen expertise to implement UDL with my staff. Thank you, Jorge. Build site-based systems for UDL implementation in order to go beyond theory, simply saying we do UDL, right? Thank you, Robert. And we like to say we use UDL, right? It's beyond doing, it's using. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. What are the outcomes that we can get through using UDL? How can we use UDL to meet our goals? Thank you, Robert. All right, just a couple of sort of UDL reminders. So this is our sort of one slide summary of UDL and how we use UDL in California. So in order to use the UDL framework, we must shift our attention from individual students to the barriers and look for barriers in the designs, not the learner. Thinking about not what each individual student needs, but what are the barriers in this design so that we can remove that barrier for all of our students. And we do that because we know that variability is the norm. Every brain is unique. And because those brains are shaped by our experiences, and we know no one human has the same experience in the world. And so we know that variability is the norm, and that's why we look for the barrier in the environment. We also know variability is contextual, and it can be planned for using those UDL guidelines. And doing all of those things, the goal of all of that is learner agency to produce learning that is purposeful and reflective, resourceful and authentic, and strategic and action oriented. So we do the things in these guidelines to help the learning become those. We give choices, we support strategy, we support emotional capacity to make sure that those are taken care of. And in order to do that, how do we use these guidelines? We set a clear, rigorous goal so we know exactly where we're going so that we can map multiple pathways to that goal. We map multiple pathways by anticipating variability, thinking about the variability of our learners and where might they be barriers. And then we design options to reduce those barriers. And those options are along these very predictable dimensions of variability, which are those boxes in our UDL guidelines. Our interests and identities is one way in which humans vary. The effort and persistence, emotional capacity, and these go along the boxes of our guidelines. Perceiving content, we vary in how we best perceive content or what language and symbols we understand or how we build knowledge. And we vary in how we interact with our learning environment, how we communicate, and how we design strategies. And so we look for barriers within each of these dimensions of variability, and we look for them in these design areas. So barriers may exist in goals, what will guide the instruction and minimize barriers to learning, motivate students, and foster learner agency. We can find them in our materials. How is the content being represented? How can students take in information and turn it into usable knowledge? And the methods, how is the content being delivered? Where are the barriers there? We can find them in our assessments, how we're asking learning to be demonstrated, and we can find it in our environment. How is the climate and culture supportive of the learning? So what is it in our environment that we can use, whether it be our resources, our tools, or our emotional environment to support our learning? And we use those UDL guidelines to design to reduce those barriers. So that's my 2.5 minute sum up of our UDL process and how we use UDL in the classroom. And then the SIC is sort of the ways that we use UDL in the school building. So how we use the SIC? We start by data gathering and analysis. And so data through a UDL lens is really what it is a hunt for barriers. So we take that UDL lens and we apply it to data, and we want to look for where are the barriers in our system? Where are the barriers in our school building? And we look for it by centering the students for whom the system is not working. So we want to really, in some ways, over-survey those students and make sure they were really understanding their experience from a user-centered design or user-centered data process. Because we want to use those margins as a way to learn about the system and to learn about where the barriers are. So that tool that we use to analyze barriers in the system is that UDL school implementation criteria. And it has 4 domains, which you talked about, I think, a little bit last webinar: school culture and environment, teaching and learning, leadership and management, and professional learning. So thinking about where are the barriers in each of those places to students' access to the learning and agency. And then again, those UDL guidelines are a tool to find those barriers in designs and learning designs within the goals, within the materials, within the methods, within the assessments, and within the environments. And so we look for that data from that user-centered perspective because we want to know the stories of the people who are using our systems, the stories of the parents, the stories of the students, the stories of the teachers, the stories of the paraprofessionals or the community members. And we like this quote by Brene Brown that maybe stories are just data with a soul. So how can we take this data and this hunt for barriers to really understand that experience of people for whom the system is not working and turn it into that soul story to help build our systems so that we can reduce those barriers.
So Melissa, I want to jump in. Hi, friends. My name is Elisa. So let's jump back to that one slide, making connections about our leadership in California, the one with one more with the domain. So friends, often as leaders, we want to minimize barriers and we enter through the door of professional learning, right? And so we think, oh, because I'm seeing my SBAC scores or whatever formative assessment is happening, we need more professional learning. So through our time together, what I think the trio, the team is going to invite us to think about is what else, right? Not only professional learning, there might be some systems and structures and leadership and management that might be contributing to these barriers being persistent, right? So the overlap is the methods, materials, assessment environment, are there barriers exist in the classroom? And then there's an ecosystem where those other barriers exist. And so diving into data allows Elisa to not be biased and said, oh, I just need more PD days for my teachers. I giggle because it's too soon, right? We just need more PD in order to minimize barriers around assessment. It might be a yes and, right? So that data gathering is going to check me around what my instinct or my bias, right, might have led me to believe was a place to start. Not about right or wrong, not moralizing it, but this data gathering process is going to help us calibrate that piece. Because Melissa, in California, we're deep in PD. Like we are in it, elbow deep. So
Nice.
I'm sure other states too, whatever.
Any other reflections before we continue? Anyone else want to say?
I want to add to what Elisa was saying as well. Like, she mentioned check our bias. And I think this, what you all will be sharing today will allow leaders to step out of what they usually look at in terms of data to really get into the learner experience. It prompts us to do that more, right? More so than what we've done. Because, again, like California, we have our dashboards, we have all this data, right? Performance data, but that's not going to give us everything we need if we're centered around the learner, right? We need more information. And so hopefully you'll find the trio will provide a way in which we could step out of what we're used to doing and looking more at the learner and what the learner is saying and data centered around that learner. So
thank you.
I'll add to this. This is Shamron again. These are the places and spaces where administrators have levers to pull for influence. And we often use the UDL guidelines to impact, as Elisa was saying, those classroom level practices through that lens. But we know that continuous improvement and long-term change cannot rest solely on the backs of our teachers. And so when we have something like this, a tool like this, this clearly helps me as a principal, as a leader, to have some specific places and spaces that I can consider and look at and examine, and then make decisions about resources and pull some levers to minimize the barriers that might exist that are in the way for teachers to do their job, or maybe there are barriers that are in the way for parents to have access to things. So I really appreciate how this elevates it and gives leaders places that we can focus on to make those long-term changes.
Yeah, and ways to support the teachers through that, for sure. Ruth, I was waiting for you because you're unmuted.
I know. Well, I'm unmuted the whole time. I was going to jump in, but I was like, oh, they got it covered. But I always like the visual. We have one colleague who says, I like these 4 domains because they really break something very large down into very manageable pieces. So to really think about it. But I think if you took the teaching and learning, which is our little green one, right? That's the classroom. If you put that in the center, that's why schools are there, right? We're there so kids can learn. But in order for that to happen, school leaders, so I should say that my background's in school leadership as well. Well, I did my very Reader's Digest version of me. But it's really impactful. Like, what's the culture of an environment of the school? Is it ready for UDL? Are you talking about it? Are people open to it? Is the community supporting it? As a school leader, thinking about leadership and management, what do you need to think about in your budget? How are you going to make those schedules next year so teachers can actually work collaboratively? And how is your professional learning design that it's driven by the teachers and the goals that they have to be able to make that happen? So you are surrounding those teachers with those supports, creating that environment for change. But thanks, Melissa.
All right. So we're moving on now to thinking about what is that learner-centered data progression. So this is something that we sort of, using implementation science and improvement science, sort of tried to build around the UDL SIC to think about why are we really doing this anyway, right? And so our first step is to identify the why. What is the vision for the students and the school and the district? So what are we trying to accomplish? And why have we chosen UDL? How can UDL or even other initiatives assist us in the goal? And we ask this question, we ask our people who are embarking on this improvement process to ask this question, because we know that when staff know the why, they're better able to solve their problems when things are not working. They're going to be more creative, they're going to have more access to things, and they're better able to connect the work to what is important and relevant to them. And that speaks to both not only better learning, it's always better learning when you can connect it to something you already know and something that's relevant and important to you, but it also kind of helps move the motivation and the work forward. So we want to ask Fred to tell us a little story for us. And our essential question here is, what is the school you were working with trying to impact, Fred, and how did they communicate that vision?
Well, I'm glad you said we want Fred to share a story, because I'm putting my Mr. Rogers hat on right now, or my cardigan, and and every to make this impactful, we need to tell a story, and it has a really interesting beginning and a middle, and it's ongoing. There's no end yet. So what is I think crucial, important to know is that I have had a longstanding relationship with Ripon High School, and we are lucky to have their instructional coaches actually on our call today. So I believe in checks and balances, and if I miss a beat of the story, a rhythm or whatever we want to call it, I know Robert will be there to bail me out a little bit. But I love to tell the story about relationships and trust, and how this work has evolved over at least 7-8 years with MTSS, and being that I've been the key point for this school district. And so the principal is Keith Rangel. He and I have had a great relationship, as well as Robert Mayfield, who's on our call. So we got to grow into all of this together, and know that it was safe. It was a safe place for us to have discussions about students and teachers, and even though this was all prior to the SIC being developed, we can see parts of the SIC where we have been actively engaged in this work. So let's talk about a story here. So the work, and it's interesting that a year ago, Keith and I sat down and we did the SIC self-assessment together. And this problem of practice was there last year, because their dashboard indicated that their English learners were not making adequate progress based on their LPAC data. So it was respond to this is, what are we going to do? We need to move. They were actually in the red a year ago and moved into the orange, but they still knew that they had a lot of work to do. So in response to that, their leadership team, the UDL team, we met together, and they came up with ways of better understanding what it feels like to be an English learner in the classroom, why their English learners weren't making adequate progress. And so this is how the story starts. And so as you can see, this is the indicator that is the most recent. And it had increased, as I had mentioned earlier. They had made some growth, but they still were in need of making some changes so that they were addressing this gap that they were experiencing. Not a lot of English learners at this school, but it doesn't matter if there's a lot or there's many or there's a few. Everyone deserves to have their access to instruction so that they can become productive citizens and do everything. So anyway, we can move to the next slide. And really, take you through maybe just a bit of time here to kind of reflect on, is this a story familiar to you? Can you make connections to the beginning of the story I'm sharing with you? And can you see a connection to the UDL school-wide implementation criteria? So we're just in the beginning right now. Just see how that works.
You can put it in the chat. You can reflect on your own. You can open your mic.
Yeah, so any of your student groups, this could resonate with you about any student group, right? But here we're going to take you on a bit more of the story. Anyone want to appreciate the emphasis on long-term relationships? And that's really been really key, where we can be very honest with each other and lead together. Okay.
So, well, our next step of our learner-centered data progression is really to develop those research questions or guiding questions, or sometimes we call them key questions that will guide our research, guide the data that we start to gather. So those key questions guide your research. They define the areas you want to investigate, and they're the first step in selection of data. So using your vision of why UDL is this foundation, what you would do is you would ask yourself, what questions could help, what questions could data help you answer about your visions and your hope for implementation? What questions about barriers do you have? If you know this is the data point you're starting with as your why, what questions about barriers do you have, and what specific populations are keeping you up at night? And after you develop those key questions, or as you develop them in the midst, you want to really take an intentional pause and think about, now we've asked these questions, who have we not asked questions about? Who are the specific populations that the system is not serving well? Are they represented in our key questions? And what do we want to know about their experience? What do we want to know about the barriers of the folks that we're focusing these key questions on? So in your exploration, Fred, what questions did you want to know about the problem you were trying to solve?
Well, considering that this site, a school site or a high school, has a small percentage of English learners, does everyone know who in their classroom is an English learner? Have you built the I had opportunity to make connections and get to know your students and know what their prior experiences have been with school. So I think part of what I want to know, I'm a former EL teacher myself, is really wanting to know what their prior schooling or experiences have been. And I think that is key to build the relationship, not with all students, of course, but when you have students that are required to have designated ELD during the day, at some point during the day, there's a responsibility there. It's accountability that must be addressed. So kind of wanting to know if that is kind of stirred my curiosity and some of the questions I asked, because you got to know your students before you can do anything that maybe will create a path towards better ways to learn language or language acquisition.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
So Fred, if we invited all of these people to join your team today and to help you figure out what to do, how to find out more, what strategies or tools, friends out there in the cyber world, would you recommend to Fred and the school leader to use to get a deeper understanding of the problem? How would you help him understand it? So give us some ideas. What would you recommend for the school to do? And Robert, feel free to jump in. You can be part of the team too, since you
I
are
love
part of the
Robert.
team. How can they develop a deeper understanding?
I'll talk.
Yay.
Yeah, I think like most schools, I get made fun of for using the S word systems. I think that Fred and Placer County, we got to do this first round of shadowing just a few weeks ago, and then we did a follow-up with about 10 teachers just last week on their prep periods. And if we can replicate that and build it into something that we just becomes a norm on our site, to where we have this cycle of data, not just for ELs, but definitely ELs and our MLs, or I think it'd be real powerful. I don't know what that looks like, but I know we have the data, and then just making better connections and systems to communicate with our ELD teacher and her staff, because I know that that's probably lacking, or just maybe not where it could be. But I think the challenge for us, as most schools, is just consistency and follow up and implementation. I know that's what's frustrating for me, not just with school in general, but just any PD initiative. And this isn't PD necessarily, but the encouraging thing is we have a lot of teachers that are interested in this, and they all did it on their own time, and were willing to give up their own prep period. And I think it's something super simple that we could do that could yield really positive results. And I mean, what I would like to hear is, what do we do with this data besides what I've already mentioned? Having more intentional communication with like the ELD specialist. I mean, we interviewed EL students. We did like a little panel last year at the end of the year, which was really powerful. Gave us some some live data straight from their mouths, and a lot of teachers were very surprised at what they said, as their experiences in the classrooms. And but yeah, what are we going to follow up with? Because I think, like I said earlier, that the challenge with UDL, from what I've learned, is just not understanding what it is, but just implementing it, and showing teachers what it looks like, and creating a system where we're sharing that on a very regular basis, and not just having these one-off sessions to where we talk about the theory again. And I think we're doing really well. Like Fred said, this is the early stages of this particular phase. So that was a long answer. I'm gonna
It was great.
yield the mic to someone else at this point.
I think it's so good. So you talked about that you were interviewing. So interviewing students, shadowing them, really investigating the systems for communication, and being able to really understand how teachers are understanding. And when we look at UDL, big part of UDL, it's mindset, right? You've got to really shift the way that you're looking at your design. So I think those are all like huge key points. And I think people are going to be excited to see where this goes as Fred continues his tale.
Yeah, I think what you bring up, Robert, is it's not this slide here makes it seem so linear, right? Like, we're gonna do this, then we're gonna figure that out, we're gonna figure this other thing out, and we're gonna figure this other thing out. But that's not really how it works. We learn one thing, and then we want to know more, and we go back and we learn some more things, and then we want to know more, and then we try something, and then we want to know more. So it's a very cyclic. Somebody help me with that word. Secular.
Cyclical.
Thank you. What Cameron said, process. Fred, did you want to jump in for a sec?
No, I was just going to say, Robert, thank you so much for sharing that. It's because we're kind of co-telling a story now, and it's fun when we can share the same story. It isn't my story, it's their story, right? And I feel really I feel more relieved knowing that we're on the same page all the time. As we turn the pages, we're asking those same questions. So that was great. Thank you for sharing, Robert.
And so when we think about that data plan, and you kind of previewed what you designed as your data plan, Robert, you did some shadowing of English learners. There are three ways that we try to categorize them when we think about it. We think about, do we want our data to be broad and about a lot of people, or do we want to be deep and we really want to understand one person's experience? Do we want it to be inputs, what we're doing, or do we want to be outcomes, what is a result of what we're doing? And do we want it to be quantitative or qualitative? And so that quantitative data is where we started, right? We started with the California dashboard, and we know English learners are learning at this rate, but that doesn't tell us what the barriers are, right? And so that's where the qualitative data comes in, is that we learn the barriers with the qualitative data. So there are some examples that we're going to put in some of the follow-up resources. Journey mapping is a way to understand a student's experience. Instructional rounds is a sort of an input, somewhat of an input measure where what are we doing in the classroom and how are we designing flexibly. Focus groups are understanding certain groups of students' experiences. You can shadow a student like they did to understand those experiences. Empathy interviews is a very deep, like, listening process to understand what students are experiencing, and then a belonging map. And for some reason that slide has an X, but there's only one. There's no X in belonging map. But that's an interesting one where you have students sort of rate from green, yellow, or red all the spaces in the school and how much they feel like they belong. And that can sort of uncover where are the spaces in our school that we have some barriers. So when you're thinking about designing your data plan and trying to answer those questions, you know what your key questions are, then what is it that you, which one of these tools will best answer those key questions? And so we made a little chart for you around, which kind of tools might have which impacts around qualitative or quantitative, broad or deep, or input or outcome. And another thing to ask yourself when you're selecting a tool, besides like how much time do you have, where do you want to look, and what do you want to know, what is most likely to get new information? Because we don't want to just keep going over the same things over and over again. So where are we most likely to find out some more new information that we can use to design an intervention that's going to make a difference? So anything else you want to tell us, Fred and Robert, about that data collection process?
Yeah, I'd like to kind of get to what the good important stuff here is really when Robert and Keith had shared with us during our UDL team meeting how they interviewed students and to get their perspectives on what it was like to be in classrooms, and we're going to see some examples of that in just a moment. It was really about what is it that we are how are we going to create this impact that we're looking for? We're looking for different outcomes, right? So with that EL discussion that we had, it also opened up an opportunity to have a discussion with Placer County Office of Education, and were using this EL shadowing tool. And we started collaborating together and said, well, wouldn't this be great to bring to Ripon High School and try it out and see if this could be the way that they could measure what is happening in the 4 domains of listening, speaking, reading, writing, and really understand what English learners' experiences are in the classroom. So this created a great opportunity for us. As Robert mentioned, they've already gone through 2 rounds of shadowing students. I think around 19 students, I believe you've shadowed so far.
Sounds about right.
All of the teachers gave up their prep period in order to do this. I mean, this is dedication when you're willing to give up something, to give up your time for something that is so important. Really is just like the momentum we need in order to take next steps. And what it's led to is the fact that our language and literacy department here has also been in the background of this and around discussions about how can we provide effective strategies to support English learners in the classroom so that all teachers have a better awareness of the skills that or strategies that they may be using. So maybe coming up with a uniform strategy that they can start reflecting on and see what impact that has.
All right, awesome. So I want to get us to the meat. So we're going to skip that one, reflection, and we're going to talk about implementing the data plan. So gathering and analyzing the data that will inform the next steps. And Do you want to go to the young people first, or do you want to go?
Yeah, why don't we do that? Let's go to
Okay.
the young people first, and then and then I think this is really the part that will resonate most with us, hearing their voices.
All right, let me just make sure I'm sharing my computer sound. There we go. Here is Juan.
All right, Juan. So we're here to talk about challenges that you've had as an English language learner in the classroom. Can you share like one experience you had where it was difficult to learn in class?
So this year in one of my class, my teacher taught too fast for me, and I don't understand well to English, and asked for help, but him and the teacher still spoke too fast. I don't understand well the activity.
Okay, so the teacher spoke really fast, and even though you asked for help when they were speaking to you one-on-one, it was still too fast to understand?
Yes.
Okay, so have you ever tried to use a tool like Google Translate in class, and like what's your experience been using those tools?
So I tried to use Google Trends in all class, and in one specific one, my teacher told me say put your phone away, and cannot use my phone for translator, and that one is difficult for me because when I not understand well the English, that one is help me more of the teachers.
Okay, so you'd really like it if you were able to use Google Translate pretty much every day in every class, right?
Yes.
It's very helpful.
Yes, it's help for me because I don't understand well. I understand well, only know well. My English is not perfect right now, so I can use because he give me more confidence for the activities or whatever.
Okay, great. Okay, so what are some things that your teachers have done this year to help support you? I mean, we've talked about some of the barriers. What have they done that has been helpful?
During my 3 years, we stay here in the Ripon High School and play soccer all time. So when I come in my freshman year, my coach, Mr. explained things slowly during practice and English. During the games, whatever, explain me whatever activity because he want to play well me, and I try to understand all the time, and Mr. is give me more confidence for games, for practice, whatever, and I like when Mr. is coach me.
Awesome. So this is outside the classroom. You're getting just speaking slowly is very helpful for you processing important information. That's great. And you got one other you want to share, right?
Yeah. During class, I take my sport medicine class and the medical terminology, and the teacher, Mr. C, is help me give me copies, whatever in Spanish, and he want to like the Spanish to language, and he tried to understand the Spanish. And when finished the last year, so my sophomore year, my Mr. C say me, Juan Diego, I want to you in the next class, only because I want to understand better Spanish, and I want to you understand better the English.
So him communicating that to you, how'd that
Yeah.
make you feel? It sounds like it's
That
really
one,
good.
That one is very good because I speak English because I want to understand the language, and Mr. C is want to speak Spanish because he want to understand the language.
All right, so we're here with
Okay.
I want a whole webinar with Juan, friends.
All right,
Like, we need
Juan,
a
so-
whole webinar with Juan. Keep asking him questions, all domains. Love it.
so
All right, should we go on to, is it Zeitali?
Yeah.
Okay.
Zitlali.
Zitlali, thank you, Robert.
She's going to share an experience that she had in one of her classes. So what happened?
Okay, so in one of my classes, my teacher was mean and gets frustrated with my language. The teacher once said, "It's not my fault. You guys don't speak English."
So how did that make you feel?
Like, that made me feel so uncomfortable, and like I got frustrated because I couldn't have, like, that teacher couldn't help me with my homework and all of that.
Okay, so what are some ways that teachers have supported you and helped you to learn better in their classes?
Oh, my history teacher, Mr. Williams, he lets me present directly to him instead of the whole class.
So that makes you like more comfortable presenting
Yeah, because
directly to the
I'm
teacher?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you had a good experience with one of your math teachers as well?
One of my math teachers like checks in with me through the period and all my work, and yeah, she helped me a lot.
Is that what teacher?
Miss Paris.
Okay, so this Miss Parrish is walking around and
yeah.
giving you feedback, talking to you during the lesson is super helpful for you?
Yeah, because that way I can understand what they're like, what they do and all this stuff.
Perfect, thank you.
Awesome. Let's see what we have. A
She's going to share an
reflection question, I think, on our next slide.
experience. She's going to
So, Ruth, is this the right reflection question for us?
Yeah, I think it's really just thinking about, and Robert, jump in here too, just thinking about how did understanding the learner's perspective impact you? How does that impact how you consider design and how you consider instruction?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I can speak for some of the teachers. Because we had a live panel. Juan was in the live panel as well. Like at a staff meeting last May. Zitlali was too nervous, but there were a couple other guys who sat in, and it was pretty revealing. It was shocking. You know, I saw some of your facial expressions too for a couple of the things that she said. It's super sad, makes you want to like cry, right? But I think a lot of the teachers don't even realize the damage, you know, that they're doing when they talk too fast, or especially when they say really terrible things like, you know, you should already know this, or it's not my fault that, you know, you don't speak the language. And there was another reference, and these kids are all nice. They weren't teacher bashing, but they were being really raw. And I mean, one of the teachers was teaching about a historical event that was related to Mexico, and kind of just made, I think, what he didn't intend to hurt anybody's feelings, but said, well, you guys should know about this, right? And made him super uncomfortable pretty much for the rest of the year. I mean, one little comment that I don't even think was intended to harm. So, and then you have just basic stuff like barriers to where teachers just having the same rules for using Google Translate, or not allowing them to speak in their language to present, or to present just one-on-one, just simple things that these kids are intelligent, right? It's the language barrier doesn't mean that they're not thinking and that they don't understand the content. So I think just hopefully to maybe at least partially answer the question, so I don't ramble. It was very shocking to some teachers, and because I've had conversations with some of them, and at least in the short term, it brought a greater awareness of what was going through these students' minds and what their experiences were like. And that's probably partly why there was such eagerness for all these teachers to give up their preps and continue, you know, like learning about their experiences, like even deeper, more than just, you know, a couple interviews. So yeah, Fred,
great.
tag, you're it.
I think so if you like pull out your UDL guidelines right now, we can look at where we can align those barriers to the guidelines, right? We think about the young girl, like she probably didn't feel like she belonged, right, in that moment, right? So if we look up at that welcoming interests and identities and recognizing that, or even look at language and symbols and being able to honor different dialects and include them, the action and expression of being able to demonstrate your knowledge in the way that you want to demonstrate your knowledge. That's the best way for you to share, like being able to do it one-on-one. She's still hitting the same rigorous goal. The goal isn't about speaking English in front of a group of people. So I think you can take that. So when you're thinking about like, well, now what? That's what you do. You pull out those guidelines and go back and say, where does this align? How's the emotional capacity? If I am so anxious in your classroom because you don't accept me for who I am and you might call me out, I'm probably not going to step out and share a lot in your classroom. So that's the connection back. Like, where do we align that to the guidelines and where can I design using those guidelines? Yeah,
And
so
I think that's why it's so important to hear their voices, but also just to systematize this shadowing thing that we're doing and figure out other creative ways to gather data. Because I think some teachers feel like they just don't know what to do. They don't know how to help students, and it's not most of us don't get into teaching to hurt kids and make them uncomfortable, but it's overwhelming, and that goes back to what I said earlier, just with UDL and even through this UDL/EL emphasis or lens. It's just, I don't know, it's so easy. Some of these things you can just modify are not complicated.
Yeah.
But yet some of us aren't aware of them. And if we systematize teachers sharing their experiences and sharing their thoughts when they're doing these shadowings and sharing their experiences, hopefully working more closely with like the ELD coordinators and other teachers who are intentionally designing their lessons, with all this data in mind, and we do it regularly, I think this would change dramatically, which is encouraging. So we have good momentum. I don't think it would be hard to replicate or scale this either.
Exactly. You started with some broad dashboard data and you just got curious and more curious and more curious, and you're dialing down and you're digging deeper and you're staying curious. And it really sounds like the experience of your staff at your school site are committed to the time that is required to dig deeper and figure that out and make those adjustments. So
well,
really
and we could have got subs too. Fred offered subs, but we were so eager just to do it and to do the second step. And I mean, it was all teacher led too. I don't even think the admin was really involved in the second round, which was even more encouraging, which I think helps. It was just a few teachers that got trained and we all worked together to schedule it all out. And again, not that hard.
But that's the important part of leadership, is being to take the control and away, and to trust his leadership team to be able to do the work. That's where you're going to find momentum. So great job. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you
Give the
so much. And
control
I hate to interrupt this conversation, but we have 2 minutes left. Can you believe it? 2 minutes left. So I'm just going to preview this really quick. After we did all that data, we think about a root cause, and that's where the SIC comes in. So Ruth was talking about aligning those teaching and learning barriers to the UDL guidelines. We align those systems barriers to our UDL SIC, and then we use that UDL SIC as sort of a repository of best practices or ideas to get our change ideas to try to improve some of those systems. So with that, I think I'm going to have to take us to our unintentional closing, which is, as you reflect on the ideas that have been shared today, what has affirmed your thinking, pushed your thinking, and what might your learners need you to do next? So I leave you with that. And then is there any sort of housekeeping things you need to end us with, Brenda?
I'll mention that we stay on afterwards to continue the conversation. We make ourselves available for probably the next half hour or so if folks want to stick around on the call, ask some questions, elevate something, we can definitely have a discussion and point folks towards some tools and some resources as well. And then the other one that I would elevate here is the importance of feedback. Our friend, feedback is a gift, and so we want to make sure that we hear from you. What you share with us helps to inform the next steps in terms of future design and topics and content. We like to be responsive to the needs of the field, and so here we are. We really appreciate your input in letting us know what's working and what else you're looking for. So thank you, everyone, for being here.
Yeah,
One
thank
more
you
thing
too, Robert.
before
Sorry.
everyone goes. We do have our CISA, where we house all of our resources, such as this webinar. Be sure to go to our CISA website so that you can, if you want to access the recording today again, the recording will be posted there, as well as our other webinars. And then we also have resources that follow those webinars, Top Tips and Got a Minute Learning Series. Those will be posted there as well. So just be on the lookout for those resources.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Robert.
Yes, thank you, Robert. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks for being here, everyone. We'll stick around for anybody that would like to hang out and have a chat, but I think we'll stop the recording for that section of it.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Dariela, is somebody else the co-host, just in case you need to go? I've got to run to a 4:30, friends.
I didn't see
I don't know,
Darren.
we need to stop
Yes.
the recording and make
All right, I'll
friends.
stop the recording.
There you are, Darren.